From the Infowars.com studios in Austin, Texas, it's The Real News with your host, David Knight.
Welcome back. Instead of doing some news, as I usually do at the top of the hour, because of our radio stations, I'm going to keep going with this narrative about Hillary Clinton, because this truly is unprecedented for me. I've never seen the Washington Post basically turn on this kind of establishment. And what has come out, again, let me just reiterate the sequence of events here. It's the establishment Republicans who started doing research to try to take down Donald Trump. They did it. They made it about business deals that they created, fake stuff. And then when he won the nomination, they said, all right, we're not going to do it anymore. They handed over, though, to the Clintons, Fusion GPS people, and the Clintons make it about dirty, perverted sexual fantasies of theirs instead of business fantasies. That touches something about the mentality of the people who run those two different parties. Like the Republicans are saying they're fantasizing about corrupt business deals, and Clinton and their ilk are fantasizing about perverted sex. So they sex up this phony, dirty dossier, and then as President Trump wins, you have the Republican establishment in the person of John McCain, who wants to keep this Cold War going, who has a personal vendetta against President Trump, and is part of the establishment. Let's just not forget this, okay? Part of the establishment. And it was GOP leadership that blocked the investigation into the uranium deal as well. It wasn't just the corrupt Department of Justice within the Obama administration. It wasn't just Loretta Lynch. It was the establishment Republicans as well. How long have we told you that there aren't two wings of government? It's just one. It's one. It's one warbird, if you will, that is running along here. The Republicans and Democrats are two wings of the same bird. And Hillary Clinton is just one of the heads of Hydra that is being cut off right now by the establishment in an attempt to free itself from, you know, the bear trap that she got her head stuck in. It was like, man, we're going to die if we don't cut off this head. So let's cut off Hillary Clinton, and maybe we can live to fight another day. That's the situation that the GOP and Democrat and media establishment are in right now. They're going to cut her off, and that's a good thing. And we need to keep cutting heads off of the Hydra. But anyway, you have McCain, who brings it back and shops it around in Washington, gives it to the FBI, and then the FBI wants to go further. Give us some more information. We'll pay you for that information. And then when we go back to the uranium deal, the story from the Gateway Pundit, stunning that GOP leadership blocked investigation into the explosive Clinton uranium deal. And here's the evidence. In an interview with Fox News Sunday, GOP Representative Ron DeSantis revealed Republican leadership blocked him and others from investigating the Clinton Uranium One deal. And we know that this was something that was under investigation. They said, wait a minute, the guys you're trying to sell this to in Russia, this is part of a bribery, fraud, money laundering investigation that had gone on for 15 months. Yet the committee that is supposed to oversee things that are critical to the national interests of America that should have stopped this, they ignore all that. The FBI ignored all of that. The FBI had a witness. The FBI threatened the witness. They said, you better not talk, okay? So we got the Democrats with the Obama administration saying, shut this down. You got the GOP establishment, as we're now hearing here, shut it down. We've got the law enforcement establishment, the FBI, threatening the witness who is going to blow the whistle on all this stuff. Shut it down. See? That's the key. It's the deep state. It's both parties. And DeSantis said, I've spoken with a confidential informant that helped the FBI uncover the bribery scheme. He's a member of the Oversight Committee. He said, clearly it is in the public's interest that this individual be able to tell his story to Congress. But he's been gagged, not just by the Democrats. He's being gagged by the Republicans. Will Jeff Sessions remove that non-disclosure agreement from that eyewitness and expose this information? We've got Grassley calling for it. Will Sessions do this? Why are they keeping this quiet? Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. It is a banner day, a banner week, as these things are starting to unravel, as they're cutting off the one head of Hydra, which is Hillary Clinton. We had on Fox News Sunday, Congressman DeSantis talking about Uranium One. And he said, we wanted to have this witness who was telling the FBI 15 months before the deal was approved by Hillary Clinton, by the Obama administration. They were investigating the individuals involved in Russia who were trying to purchase the uranium for money laundering, for bribery, for corruption, and other issues, and yet they still approved this. And then they put a gag order on it. So you have to understand, we've got all the Democrats. We had Hillary Clinton. We had Eric Holder, who was there at the time. We also had Timothy Geithner, Secretary of the Treasury, all part of that committee that would approve sales like this that were of vital national interest. And the FBI, who was investigating this, they all covered that up. They all approved it, in spite of the FBI investigation. Been going on for more than a year. So there you have it. It's got the Democrats, you got the FBI, and then DeSantis brings in the Republican establishment as well. He said on Sunday, he said the informant that he spoke to had signed his original non-disclosure deal with the Obama administration Attorney General Eric Holder, and he was threatened with reprisal by the Justice Department under Attorney General Loretta Lynch when he tried to come forward in 2016. He said he was very afraid they were going to kill him. He said they're afraid. He said, I was afraid people in Washington would kill me. I was afraid the Russians might kill me. And they absolutely, the FBI threatened him with jail if he told people about the corruption that all of them knew about before they approved the deal. At the end of the interview, he said something that was very stunning. He said the GOP leadership blocked him from investigating evidence from the Clinton uranium deal. There you have it. The Democrats, the Obama administration, the FBI, the establishment Republicans all covered this up. The same people who did the same thing with the dirty dossier. The Republicans started it. They created some fantasies of theirs about corrupt business dealings with President Trump and the Russians. So that's the Republican fantasy, to try to shut him down in the primaries. Then when he wins in the primaries, the Democrats take it over. They put in their perverted sexual fantasies. Then when he wins, you've got John McCain, the Dr. Strangelove of the new Cold War, sends a guy to get it from the British spy who was writing this work of fiction and to bring it back, and he shopped it around personally. McCain personally shopped it around and personally gave it to FBI Director James Comey. And then he says that he didn't personally give it to BuzzFeed. Maybe it was the guy that he sent to get it, to bring it back. Here's Tom Cotton talking about the dirty dossier a couple of days ago, saying you cannot give any credibility to this thing. And now we know why, because the Washington Post has come out and said the same thing. But here's what Tom Cotton said before the Washington Post exposed this progression of events.
Have you seen anything that's helped you determine how credible this Trump dossier has been?
Well, I think some of the key points about its credibility are unknown. As Senator Burr said at a press conference a couple weeks ago, as anyone who's followed the matter closely knows, I mean, this outfit here in Washington, D.C., Fusion GPS, has gone to the greatest lengths possible to try to conceal who paid them, which makes me think it was probably a Democratic political operative or Russian intelligence service. Right now, I mean, you've got their employees or officers fifth in front of the House of Representatives and are now fighting in the district court here to quash a subpoena of their bank records. I mean, they have a constitutional right to take the fifth. We have a common sense right to draw what inferences we will from that. Likewise, I don't think we know anything about who the sources for this document is. I mean, this form about whom we know little. Chris Steele, I don't think was running around Russia interviewing people who claim to have firsthand knowledge of any of these outlandish allegations. So for all our knowledge, we could be dealing not just with sources, but subsources whose identities, we don't know. Mm-hmm. And for that matter, who are being paid to provide salacious information, or if they were officers of Russian intelligence who were tasked to provide that information. So I think you can't give any credibility to it at this point. Certainly not until we answer those questions, nor have I seen any reason to do so.
Okay, so that was a day or so ago. And what do you say? Things change very quickly. That was 2 days ago. He goes, they're shopping this thing around. They go up there. They keep pleading the fifth, these Fusion GPS people. They plead the fifth when they talk to the House Intelligence Committee. So he goes, I don't think there's any credibility to this, but the question is, who paid them to make this stuff up? Maybe it was the Russians. See, it always goes back, the Russians are always the fall guys. Whenever they want to create some kind of a fictional thing, they always go, grab Boris Badenov and Natashka. We'll blame it on them, you know. That's what they do. I mean, it's like, oh, the Russians must have done some dirty business dealings. Oh, the Russians must have set up some kind of a honey trap with Donald Trump. Oh, the Russians must have paid then to make none of this happen. Well, then the Russians must have paid to make all this stuff up. Are you getting tired of that? I mean, this is just absurd, just absurd. So now they've seen who paid for it. Yeah, it was Republican establishment figures who paid for it. It was the DNC and Hillary Clinton who paid for the next phase of it. And it was establishment Republican John McCain who shopped it around and got the FBI to try to pay for more of it. Okay? Didn't anything to do with the Russians. I mean, they were the convenient villains of this, as they always are. Yeah, they did buy the uranium. They did buy the uranium. You know what? Vladimir Putin is trying to do things in his nation's interests. That's always the game. You know, Donald Trump has said, hey, we're going to have nationalism here. And that means that you're going to try to get the best trade deal or whatever for your country. And we're going to try to do the best job for our country. But that's not the way the game has been played. Not by the Clintons and others. What they would do, it wasn't like Vladimir Putin came over and seduced this virginal Hillary Clinton, who was so virtuous, into betraying America for money. No, that didn't happen. Everybody knew how the Clintons operated. They'd seen what they'd done with the Chinese back in the 90s, with Charlie Tree and the rest of them. Remember, they gave Charlie Tree immunity to testify about what the Clintons had done. And usually what they do is they give somebody who is at the bottom of the scheme or who is a bagman or something, they give them legal immunity so they can get them to testify against the kingpins in the crime syndicate, okay, or the racketeering group, which is what the Clintons are. They're a racketeering group. And so usually you'll give immunity, the FBI would give immunity to somebody like Charlie Tree to then testify about what the Clintons did to betray this country to the Chinese. And they did. They gave immunity to him. And he testified about what the Clintons did. But unlike every other case where they take somebody from the mafia and they say, you know, tell us about the Don. What did the Don do? And he sings like a bird. So he gets immunity. He gets a plea deal. And then they take that information and they send the Don to jail, don't they? When they're going after the mafia. But not when they go after the Clinton mafia. Instead, they have the guy sing like a bird, and they say, okay, well, that was very interesting. Thank you so much. You can go, and so can the Clintons. We're not going to do anything with that information after they gave him immunity. So everybody in the world, if they want to do something for their country, and clearly the Russians are operating in their own interests. I mean, they're doing things to protect themselves, and part of that is to get rid of the petrodollar. We talked about that multiple times, the fact that they are now tripled their gold reserves to protect their financial interests. But of course, when they protect their natural interests and their national interests with gold reserves, that means that that damages our fiat currency, our petrodollar, which is basically a Ponzi scheme fraud with the help of the Saudi Arabians. And so when he tries to get the uranium for the advantage of his country, where's he going to go? He's going to go to a known criminal like Hillary Clinton, and he's going to buy what he needs. And then we wind up getting the shaft, just like we do from the Federal Reserve when it comes to our currency. And that's what happened here, folks. And it is now coming out, an amazing day that the Washington Post is putting this stuff out. So we're going to see what happens with this. We've now got here, are they going to do something with it? Have Grassley now inviting Townsend to provide information about this informant that said, hey, all these people were investigating it 15 months before Hillary Clinton and Obama approved this. We now got the House GOP chairman announcing that they're going to do a probe of Obama's Justice Department. Yes, please do. Please do. Where is our Justice Department under the Trump administration? Why aren't they probing this? Jeff Sessions, where are you? I'm David Knight. I'll be here after the break. Welcome back on this Wednesday, October 25th, 2017. We're going to be talking about the other person who was unmasked in the last 24 hours. We had Hillary Clinton unmasked by the Washington Post, and then Jeff Flake came out and unmasked himself. We're going to let you hear some of the things that he said as this bitter loser, this establishment creature, is going down in flames. He knows that he can't get reelected. He knows that there is a grassroots movement to take people like him and Bob Corker out. They're not going to be able to win re-election. Bob Corker got out immediately after the primary, where the Republican establishment, and again, let's just remind everybody that Republican establishment was knee-deep in the cover-up Uranium One, just like Hillary Clinton, just like the Obama administration, but it was also people at the upper level of the establishment in the Republican Party. And they were also involved in the production and the distribution of the dirty dossier, just like the Democrats were, and just like the FBI was. And so you've got the Republican and Democrat establishment and the FBI at the center of both the dirty dossier and Uranium One. And these people are seeing the handwriting on the wall when they spent $30 million to defeat Roy Moore, and he defeated their puppet, Luther Strange, in Alabama. So we're going to go to Jeff Flake in just one moment, real quickly. I want to run down the sales that we have at InfoWarsStore.com, because that's what funds this program. That's what funds everything that we do here at InfoWars. And we've got some new sales, big discounts on Silver Bullet, our colloidal silver, as well as Winter Sun, our vitamin D supplement. Both of those are 50% off. That's 50% off Silver Bullet and Winter Sun. Right now, that's a new sale that's started this week. We still have, for a limited time, 50% off Brain Force Plus. If you've never tried this, this is a great time to try it. I know you're going to like it. It's my favorite supplement that I take here at InfoWars. And, of course, if you tried it, it's a great time to stock up on it. Brain Force Plus, 50% off. And also, we have 10% off Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink. That's a great way to get all of your essential vitamins and minerals without taking a handful of pills. And it is a great tasting drink mix, and you can make it taste like anything you want and just drink all your vitamins very quickly. You can get 10% off right now if you enter the code at checkout, VITA10. That's VITA 10. Get 10% off Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink at checkout when you enter the code VITA10. All right, let's go to Jeff Flake, and let's hear his bitter statements attacking President Trump as he said, "I'm going to quit. That's it. You're not going to have me to kick around anymore. I know that I can't win the re-election." So this is what he then did within the last 24 hours. Here's Jeff Flake.
We must never meekly accept the daily sundering of our country. The personal attacks, the threats against principles, freedoms, and institution, the flagrant disregard for truth and decency, the reckless provocations, most often for the pettiest and most personal reasons, reasons having nothing whatsoever to do with the fortunes of the people that we have been elected to serve.
Yeah, did he say anything
None
about
of these
Barack
appalling
Obama?
features
I
of
remember
our
that.
current
Did he
politics
criticize Obama
should
for
ever
that stuff?
be regarded as normal. We must never allow ourselves to lapse into thinking that that is just the way things are now.
But he did that all through the Obama
To
administration.
this condition, thinking that it is just politics as usual, then heaven help us. Without fear of the consequences and without consideration of the rules of what is politically safe or palatable, we must stop pretending that the degradation of our politics and the conduct of some in our executive branch are normal. They are not normal.
Okay, let's let it go at that, because this guy goes on and on and on, pontificating with his moral superiority when he went along with everything that Barack Obama did. Didn't have any kind of moral outrage while Barack Obama was running roughshod over the Constitution and doing whatever he wanted to like a tyrant. And so, you know, when I heard this, what it reminded me of was that famous quote from A Tale of Two Cities with Ronald Colman. Let me play that for you if you haven't heard it. This is basically what I heard from Jeff Flake as he was coming off of his moral high horse about his moral superiority to President Trump as he knows that he can't win re-election. This is what he sounded like to me. Standing there before the guillotine.
Far better thing I do than I have ever done. It's a far, far better rest I go to than I have ever known.
Yeah, he stands right there as he's headed towards the political guillotine that was called the 2018 election. And so he comes up here with this moral superiority. Let's listen to some of the nonsense coming out of Bob Corker. Let's go to that clip.
He's obviously not going to rise to the occasion as president.
Do you think he's a role model to children in the United States?
No.
You don't?
No, absolutely not. I think that, you know, the things that are happening right now that are that are harmful to our nation. Whether it's the breaking down of, we're going to be doing some hearings on some of the things that he purposely is breaking down, relationships we have around the world that have been useful to our nation. But I think at the end of the day, when his term is over, I think the debasing of our nation, the constant non-truth telling, the name calling, the things like, I think the debasement of our nation will be what he'll be remembered most for, and that's regretful. And it affects young people. I mean, we have young people who, for the first time, are, watching a president stating, absolute non-truths, non-stop, personalizing.
Yeah, he's exposing what you're doing. Let's leave it at that. He wants to talk about how, isn't this awful? I mean, all these relationships that President Trump is shutting down, like those relationships, those cozy relationships that Bob Corker stood for between the insurance companies who are getting subsidies by stealing money from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac investors. He was one of the guys who was blocking that, standing astride that, propping up Obamacare. Yeah, let's talk about relationships, your relationships with the crony capitalists that you were robbing the American people of. He's very upset because President Trump has been exposing their corrupt game plan and has been shutting it down. That's what he's upset about. And he's upset, just like Jeff Flake, about the fact that he's not going to be able to win re-election. That's what these guys are really upset about. Trump has exposed their game. They are hanging out there. I mean, when you look at Obamacare, that alone was going to take down Bob Corker. But he's a corrupt part of the business establishment. When you look at Jeff Flake, he's a junior partner of John McCain. Two of them coming out of Arizona. It's going to be kind of interesting now because we're going to have both senators in Arizona. Both of these positions are going to be up for re-election pretty soon. Flake was going to be running in 2018, and we don't know when the replacement for McCain is going to be taking place. We've got to wait for medical issues to play out in his particular case. And so we're going to have two Senate elections there in Arizona. The only good thing about that might be that we won't have so many conservatives running against each other. Maybe they can decide which ones are going to run in which elections so they don't cannibalize that and let an establishment player come up through the middle because all the conservatives and Tea Party people are running against each other. All right, we're going to be talking in the next segment to Aleksandr Dugin, very important media figure in Russia. We're going to talk to him and get some perspective on the Russian Revolution. October 25th, 2017, 100 years after some significant events in Red October. And we'll talk to him about what's going on in Russia today. This will be not the kind of Boris Badenov interviews that we've seen from the mainstream media. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's October the 25th, 2017. It's 100 years after a very significant event in the Russian Revolution, known as the Red October by many people. I wanted to talk to Aleksandr Dugin. He is a very influential person in media and in politics in Russia, so I wanted to get his perspective on 100 years after the Russian Revolution. He wrote a book called The Fourth Political Theory. This is something that has had a lot of influence in Russian politics. And he has also started a new political party, a new movement, the Eurasia movement that he calls. And the political party is the Eurasia Party. And it is a fully vested Russian political party. But I want to get his perspective on a lot of different things. He was also involved with the religious restoration in Russia. The Orthodox Church is in the ascendancy here now that we've seen the communist move aside. That has now become a cultural center in Russia as well. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Dugin.
Hi, thanks you to invite me, Mr. Knight.
Thank you so much. And I want to, because we're here at the anniversary of the Russian Revolution, and because you've been so involved with the Orthodox Church and the revival of Christianity post-communism in Russia, comment a little bit about what happened to people and to Christians after Lenin took power.
The October Revolution is the part of our history. In order to understand the meaning of this event, we need to have the idea about Russian history, what we are, what we have been, and what have we suffered during Soviet time. So first of all, Russian identity is linked deeply with Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Christianity is our identity. It's not only the part of our identity, is the essence, it is the axis of our identity. We became the people with Christian faith. So before, we have no idea about what we have been before Christianity. So our identity was made, was constructed, was organized around this Christian Orthodox tradition. And Bolsheviks, they have destroyed precisely this essence of Russian people. And that was the great catastrophe of our history, because that was the end of time. In our history, we have passed through some ends of time. In the time of in the 17th century, we have passed very difficult period about this the split of our Orthodox Church for old believers and new believers. That was as well considered by the Christian conservative part of our society as end of the time and as coming of Antichrist. But that was only part. The old believers they believed in the traditional foundations of our Christian tradition. They were very negative. They had negative attitudes toward modernity, the Western modernity. They were very proud to be Christian Orthodox. Instead of them, they and old believers were defeated in front of modernity. And in the beginning of the 20th century, in the October Revolution, that was the second end of time in our history, because this time was destruction not only of the part of our church, but that was the destruction of all our Christian identity. And the people who have won, have usurped the power in the 17th, they were completely alien to our tradition. They were culturally, ethnically as well. They were not Russian. They were they were globalists, they were internationalists. They hated Russian identity, and they have destroyed all the foundations, existential foundations, intellectual, metaphysical foundations of our identity. And that was the end of time, end of Russian time.
Mr. Dugin, I want to interject here, because, you know, when you're talking about this and you're saying that the Orthodox Church in Russia was really kind of the foundation of the culture, the foundation of the nation, I would say that Vladimir Lenin would agree with you, because, you know, he went specifically after the churches to destroy them. You know, Marx had said that it was the opiate of the masses. And so what he did was he realized that in order to make a new society, he had to tear down the foundations of the existing society, the foundations of both the culture and the legal system, and everything, by going after the church. And so I think that was a key part of what he did there. You know, we had, you remind me in a lot of ways of Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, who said that men have forgotten God. And it was a very deliberate effort to make man forget God that the communists did as they came into Russia. And I guess the question is, you know, and of course, Solzhenitsyn, when he came to the West, he had a lot of criticism for the West as well, saying that we have also forgotten God. But he eventually went back to Russia. And I guess the question is, what has happened after we saw the fall of the Soviet Union? Because most Americans don't really make a distinction between the Soviet Union and Russia as it is today. What has fundamentally changed? Because Solzhenitsyn went back, Have you recovered the foundations of God and the Orthodox Church, and how was that done? When was that done?
So first of all, you are absolutely right about destruction of Russian identity through destruction of Christian Orthodox consciousness. So without Christian roots, without our belief in God, we could not exist as a people, as a nation. We was formed around that, and that make our basis. So Bolsheviks, they have consciously destroyed this foundation in order to exchange the Christian vision of the world, Orthodox Russian vision of the world, by their Marxist conception. And they were successful in that. They have succeeded in that, and that is our tragedy, because that was a kind of heresy that has overcome our orthodoxy, and the problem is that after the end of communism, we are trying to recover from this trauma, from this catastrophic period, but it seems to be very difficult. We are not more absolutely. It is absolutely clear that we are not anymore Soviet or communist. I never wasn't. I fought against that with my humble forces. I was Orthodox, I was traditionalist, I was conservative, but I would say that it is very difficult to come to our identity, to restore it. We are trying now. We certainly are no more communist. We have finished with this Soviet identity, but at the same time, it's not so easy to restore the real faith, the real church. We are trying that. To make that. And now what is interesting, now that are not communists that attack us more, but liberals, the West blame us not for being communist, but for being Russian, for being Orthodox Christians. And here Solzhenitsyn is quite right, because it is not only Russians that have lost the belief, the faith in God.
That's right, it's the West. And we got to go to a break. We're talking to Aleksandr Dugin. We're going to come right back, and I want to ask him about the current state in Russia, ask him about his political philosophy, the Eurasia movement, and his fourth political theory. What is behind that? He describes himself as a national Bolshevik. I want to get him to define what that means. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Aleksandr Dugin. He is a Russian author and a political scientist. He's written a book called The Fourth Political Theory. It has been called a sensation in Russian political circles. We want to talk to him about his political philosophy. He's started a new political party there, the Eurasia Party. And before we go into the state of Russia today, because we're looking at the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, Red October, I wanted to ask him, because we were talking in the last segment about how he and others like Alexander Solzhenitsyn viewed the Orthodox Church as the foundation of Russia. And clearly, Lenin and Marx did as well, calling it the opiate of the masses, taking it down, because they realized that if they could take down the religious and cultural foundations of a country, they could erect whatever they wanted to. And so before we get into what's going on today and how Mr. Dugin views America today, I want to ask him real quickly, when you talked about how they completely destroyed Christianity in Russia, was there some underground thread that was there? You're talking about how you're trying to restore the foundations of Christianity in Russia that were lost, but what did individual Christians do? Did they go into underground churches like we see happening in China, for example?
Oh, that's the real problem, because in a certain moment, almost all churches were closed. The majority of them were destroyed. So they have tried. The Bolsheviks have tried to come into the consciousness, into the head, into mentality of Russian people in order to eradicate, thrown out the religion's feeling. But instead of all that, in spite of all that, the the faith lived, not directly Christian tradition, but the faith in Christian God, in Christ, lived in spite of all that in the souls of the people and everybody. We have conserved Christian identity without being Christians or participating in the rites and going to the churches. And we tried to find any open possibility in order to come to return to that. Certain people conserved the tradition. They managed to visit from time to time the churches. They were very rare. But what is much more important, our people, as a mystical body of Christ, has conserved this faith in the heart. And where the chance was open in the perestroika to the end of the Soviet time, our church was recreated from nothing, from almost nothing, and that was a flourishing of this return to our identity, to our roots. It's not easy process, but what is interesting, maybe that is dialectic, maybe that is paradoxal. In spite of the communist dictatorship, atheist, materialist, Marxist, Leninist dictatorship orientated against our faith, we rest Christians. We have saved our faith, and in the new possibility, when the kind of the shadow of liberty arrived, we have used it in order to restore our church consciousness, our church, and that is completely opposite to what is going on in the West. West is so-called free, but you now is much more atheist, Marxist-Leninist that we were. So that is interesting. So that,
and you know, I think at the center of this, Mr. Dugin, is Lenin himself, the guy who led the October Revolution. And the fact that, you know, we said, like Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn said, men have forgotten God. Well, it was Lenin who made himself God. And it was interesting for me to see that about 70% of the people in Russia would like to have Lenin, who's been preserved, his body has been preserved there in Red Square. It's a mausoleum for everybody to have it to watch. But about 70% of the people, because there's still about 30% of the people who are still hardcore communists, but the rest of Russia has essentially turned, and they would actually like to have him buried. Rather than to keep him on display. I think that is an interesting symbol, the man himself, Lenin, who still presides there in Red Square, and 70% of the people in Russia, at least, would like to have him removed and bury the past, the Leninist past. Is that correct?
That, yes, you are correct. But at the same time, there are not so much hardcore communists. 30% of these voters, they don't want exactly to conserve the Lenin, because that was a kind of Soviet, the Soviet period was on the Christian side, from the Christian side of view, that was the catastrophe. But we had a kind of Soviet patriotism. That was a kind of continuation, perverted continuation of Russian patriotism. And because now the Soviet past is criticized not only by us, by Christian, by conservative, but as well by liberals. They try to demonize Russian history as a whole. So some people defend not so much Lenin as the symbol, because the communism is dead here. It is alive in a new form in cultural Marxism or globalization in the West. But here it is absolutely dead. But Soviet patriotism in the old agers, it still exists, but it has nothing to do with Lenin as this anti-Christian person. It is a kind of continuation of the patriotism. So there is no Leninism, including our Russian communists. Modern era communists are much more patriotic in some special way. So Russia is returning to itself, and the problem is when there will be the turn of the West to return to your Christian Greek-Roman roots, because we have overcome with great suffering. We have overcome this disease of communism, of atheism and materialism, and now it is your turn to do the same, to overcome, to recover your identity, because you are losing your identity. The dictatorship of globalists is more or less, for us, is very, very similar to what we have experienced ourselves.
And, you know, when you're talking about the fact that, yes, we have embraced the values of Marxism in many ways, more so than the people of Russia right now, because, and you mentioned cultural Marxism, that is political correctness. That is the tactic, the technique that was used to stifle any kind of opposition. And now that is running rampant in America. And, of course, those same people who uphold cultural Marxism, who uphold political correctness, are the very ones who are going around trying to tear down the foundations of our culture, of our civilization, of our religion, going all the way back to Christopher Columbus. I mean, it's a very literal tearing down of the foundations that we see now. Now, you've spoken about the globalists. You're a very anti-globalist, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about, and we're going to have to take a break in about 2 minutes or so, but if I can, I'll keep you over to one more segment. But I wanted to ask you about your Eurasia movement. And when you were talking about that back in 2002, you saw it as you saw a war that was brewing between Russia and you saw a conflict where you needed to have a struggle between the bourgeois and the American Revolution. Are you still, is it the American Revolution in general that you are upset about, or do you still have that opinion? That was back in 2002. Have things changed now?
So the most important thing has changed during the Trump's campaign. So I never thought about very existence of American people as that power that could say no to the globalization, that could say no to this global government, to this interventionism, and this decision to support Donald Trump of American people is, in my eyes, more important than Trump himself. So there is new force, new subject in the history that appears, and now I think that we need to reconsider our relations. So we should not be in the war, United States against Russia, Russians against Americans. We have committed many sins, many bad, evil actions, both of us, our people and your people. But now we are in danger, and our enemy is unique. It attacks us and attacks you. It is globalist, and now
I agree. Yes, and so we're going to explore that a little bit further. We got to take a quick break, Mr. Dugin, and we'll be right back. We're talking to Aleksandr Dugin. What is the true enemy? He sees us as the Trump movement, which is bigger than Trump himself, as a movement to take back control from the globalists who have, quite frankly, been headquartered here in America for a very long time. We'll be right back with Aleksandr Dugin.